Hello and welcome, I'm Karjan. This is Let's Art, Operation Blinking Mirror Edition. I've pretty much got everything outlined except for these last two blue trees in the background. And I have decided that I am going to not just attempt to use the lines that I've already provided, but rather I'm going to re-outline them with just quick strokes and use this to actually be the lines that I use instead of those rough outlines. That I put down initially. It won't change too much. But it will change some of it. Like how I have this going out slightly differently. It's just the way relining works. At least that's the way it works for me. I'm actually pulling my hand across the screen for some of these strokes, like right here. I'm locking my wrist and my fingers and then pulling my hand because it helps me get a more reliable edge. Than what I can get if I'm actually moving my wrist. And that plays into the fact that I don't really have a reliable... And you can see my hand is kind of wavering all over the place. I don't have a very stable drawing hand. Unless it's braced. So I tend to attempt to brace myself. Whoops. I tend to attempt to brace myself, and that's another reason why I don't like going towards the edges that much. I attempt to brace myself as much as possible when I'm drawing because my hand is just not stable or steady. So after I get these lined out properly, and then do some quick editing to see, these lines are not draw through here, but I don't really like... That's a little too angled. Whoops. That's the problem with touch screens, as usual. Great big branches. Great big branches, great big trees. Probably be another one kind of outish here. That'll do. Throw it more forward of the tree itself. Oops. That's a bit too thick, so we're gonna move that closer in. Yeah, like that. Okay. So at this point, I turn these lines off, which leaves me with a bunch of green trees. And I zoom in so that I can see what I'm doing. And go back to cleaning my lines up. So after I've finished with all of these lines, the next step is to make yet another duplicate of everything. Because that's how I roll. I make plenty of duplicates because just in case. And then I need to go back through and find all of the points where where there are lines that shouldn't be. For example, the lines down here of Miku Miku's paw, which is supposed to be behind Nina's arm. Those lines will need to be erased. And I think there's some places where the log itself, like right here and in through here, where there's pieces of log where the lines are visible and they shouldn't be, so those will be erased. And just generally small little cleanups like that. I'll also move Nina's legs after merging those layers together. I'll move them as a unit so that I don't need to attempt to put everything back in its proper place. I think that's generally it in terms of what needs to be quote-unquote fixed. And then I will invert the black background to white, and I will basically desaturate all of these colors and turn it all into turn it all into black. And then the line art will be finished. Normally, if I was doing one of my small character pieces, at that point I would also merge all of the line art layers together. But in this case, all I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the extra layers that were created during this process, like that layer of the blue trees that was underneath this, the prep outline. I'll erase layers like that. I'll delete them. And I will merge the individual pieces. So like Nina's outline will be all of one piece and Flick's outline will be all of one piece. But I'm not going to actually merge all of the individual pieces of line art into a single frame, into a single layer, because in this case I'm going to need to play with pieces of the line art being under some color and over some other color. So it's just easier to keep everything separate in this instance. But normally I would take it down into a single layer. So that's what I intend to do next. So I get all of this cleaned up. I'll also probably end up finding more pieces when I turn it black. When I turn it to black line art on a white background, I'll end up finding more errors than what I found. And sometimes I'll correct them, and sometimes I'll just go, well, I don't really care at this point. So we'll see how it all ends up looking at the end. And the sad part is that a significant amount of these trees back here is actually going to be hidden by other things, but I want them there because I cannot freehand backgrounds. I need to have something there initially that I can work off of. So I cannot for the life of me freehand backgrounds. I've tried. It ends up looking okay-ish. It's definitely not spectacular, and it's definitely not something I enjoy doing. Of course, it doesn't help that most of my art, I don't end up thinking about a background until I've already got like all of the characters colored and everything in place, and then I'm looking at it going, that would look nice with the background. So now I have to fit a background into the picture, as opposed to fitting the characters into a background or creating a background with the characters. I just have to sort of wedge a background into something, and that's not fun. I don't enjoy that. I never have. I tend to do it more often than not, though, because it's kind of a habit to not think about backgrounds for me to not think about backgrounds until everything is already done and colored. The fact that I thought about a background for this one was mostly because the background plays actually a fairly important role in the picture. Because one of the characters is hiding in the background. And that's important. The rest of this is hopefully a little easier to trim back. Because it's not too wavy. My cat is playing with one of his toys in the background. It was found, his toy was found underneath the couch when the couch got moved to clean under it. And we found his toy. Now he's quite literally throwing it around into the air and throwing it around and chewing on it. I'm not really surprised. When I first made it for him, he did the same thing, and then he eventually lost it after like a week or so. Hopefully this time it will be a little longer before he loses it again, but I don't think it will be. So, the toy he's playing with is a, it's made of rabbit fur. Well, and hide. Rabbit leather with fur still attached is what it is. We got the idea to do that for the cat because I have a rabbit fur pouch that was a gift from a Native American friend of mine. He'd basically killed, skinned, tanned, and made the result into a bag himself. And my cat would get a hold of it and drag it around and kind of grr, 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 this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. And, you know, I didn't really want my present to get damaged like that. So that's currently locked up, far away where he cannot get it. And went out and got some rabbit fur from Hobby Lobby and made him a stuffed mouse. Sort of. It's more of a football-y shape, but the cat really doesn't care about the shape. He likes the fact that it's made of leather and it's got fur and it's got something for him to sink his claws and teeth into. I'm going to have to make another one because he's managed to almost completely tear one half of it apart. Because the first piece that I did ended up being taken from near the hind leg, so the hide is a bit thin on part of it. So he's he's chewed and clawed his way through it. But he still enjoys it. And I end up finding pieces of rabbit fur scattered around because he's ended up actually pulling the fur from the hide. I don't really care. It was a toy that we made for him, and got enough leather out of the hide to make maybe 1 or 2 more toys for him, and it was only $10, I think. Takes maybe a half an hour to cut, sew, and stuff. It's just a simple shape, doesn't take much effort. Cat gets plenty of enjoyment out of it. It's all I care about. Got this tree half done. Whoops. Got this tree half done. Hallelujah. I don't really care. Some of this I'm being sloppy on because I don't really intend for it to show. So I don't want it to show. So I'm not really caring about being entirely neat with it. But some of it has to be relatively neat, like this down here. It'll actually show up more than the stuff near the top. Just need to edge this down a little bit so it's not quite so jagged. There we go. There. Clean that up. Clean this up. This needs to be cleaned up a lot. Didn't really help the zoom level that I was at when I was actually drawing. It tends, the further you're zoomed out, the more difficult I find it to draw a proper line. Leave that. I'll need to go back in there and clean that out though, so that it's a little thinner, a little cleaner rather. There. Fill in that hole. So if you don't fill that in, it'll leave, whoops, Control Z. If you don't fill that in, it'll leave an interesting gap in your lines. Okay. Almost finished with this tree. Whoops. This isn't turning out half bad. I wonder how I'll feel about this piece in a month. I probably won't like it at all. That's the way of things. Yep, that's the way of things. I'll like something that I do, and then in a month I won't like it anymore because I will now see everything that I shouldn't have done, or should have done differently. I don't think there is a single piece of art that I've ever done that I am pleased with a month later. But that's probably just the nature of myself, really. In a month, I don't like... Well, it's not really that I don't like it. It's just that after about a month, I can see things that I should have done differently. And it makes me realize that, yeah, I'm still not at a point where I feel good about my art. Then again, I don't know if I will ever reach a point where I feel honestly good about my art. You know, no matter... Excuse me. No matter how much I work, there's always room for improvement, and we are always our own worst critics. So, one more tree down. Last tree. Last piece of work that I need to finish the lines on. And this is only half of a tree. Which means that it'll go by half as fast. Yes, I know exactly what I said there. I'm saying that this will take longer because it's smaller. And it probably won't, but that's just the way my luck works sometimes. The smaller it is, the more effort I have to put into it. Get caught up in the details. That's the problem I have with my writing, too. I just get caught up in the details, and the story goes nowhere, and then I have to strip out thousands and thousands of words that are basically nothing. And it's not really details about, you know, the place, or sensory details, or descriptions of characters. It usually ends up being things like You know, here's details of the society that they're in now. Here's why this is happening. Here's why that's happening. You know, cultural details that are absolutely fascinating and do help me write a better story. It's just that in the end, I need to pull all of that out and just put it into sort of more of a research sort of thing, a research file that, you know, lets me look up and see, well, in this society, this means X and that means Y, but in this society, X is represented by this other thing, and Y is represented by the thing that means X in that one society. So, you know, now we've got conflict. And that usually ends up into my first draft of any real long story that I try to write. Then I have to pull out in my second draft. I do allow myself to do it, though. So I'm pretty sure I could stop myself if I really wanted to. But it helps in the long run, so I just get used to the fact that there are usually tens of thousands of extra words in my initial draft of something. Just like I did Nano this year, and I won. That was pleasing to me, since just like with art, I haven't really had time to do writing I haven't had time or energy to do writing in years. So being able to sit down and actually win Nano, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's National Novel Writing Month, where the goal is to write 50,000 words in the month of November. I'm going to turn off these two characters so that I can see this more cleanly. And I just know that when I get back to the story that I was writing, which is for a community that I'm part of. It's not actually anything that I ever intend to attempt to get published. It's just a bit of for fun writing. When I get around to cleaning it up and finishing it, those 50,000 words that I wrote will probably be reduced down to maybe 10,000. And then, you know, the rest of it will have to be finished. I think the story that I was working on is probably a good maybe 30,000 words, something like that. But I'll probably end up writing 100,000 or more in the process. Of course, the more I write into a world or society, the fewer tangents I end up going on, because the more I have already I've already diverted onto this tangent or that tangent. I already know why this is happening or that is happening, so I don't have to go into it anymore. It's just something that's there. So the further into a project I get, the fewer diversions there are, which means the more good words I'm writing. But it's still something that happens. There will always be something that will distract me and make me go off on an ooh shiny tangent. Wow. This is... trying to get this finished as quickly as I can, which means I'm kind of being sloppy at this point. I don't really want to be sloppy, but it's happening. Lots of clicking. Okay. This needs to be thinned out. There. And then this. This needs to be just a little bit more. So, I think it's something that I don't know. Lost my train of thought. Boom, crash, bang, train derailed. I do want to become a published author at some point. I have no intention of trying to go professional with art. It's just not something that I could ever really see myself doing. Mostly because I don't see myself becoming good enough at art to have anyone want to buy pieces from me. I see it as just a hobby. A hobby I tend to kind of like. Although I do still have a bit of a love-hate relationship with art from my past. I don't have the jealousy issue anymore, like I've said, but there's so much effort involved in art, in drawing and painting and this sort of stuff on. And it's just not really something I can see myself doing a lot of, especially because, I mean, I've mentioned it before, but I took like 2 hours where I didn't do anything with my right hand, and I'm back to, even during this little bit that I've done here, I'm already back to my thumb is paining me much more than it should be. it'll probably start cramping within the next maybe 15 minutes. I think I have left before my hand actually starts cramping and I can no longer grip the pen. And that's really why I don't see myself doing art any sort of long term. Because of that old injury of mine that still bothers me to this day. Okay. And at this point, I have finished all of the lining that I care about. So I'm going to call this here, and next time we'll turn everything to its proper color and start erasing start erasing all of the overlapping lines that shouldn't be there, like this. So, see you next time.